Is this working?
Yep, I hear you. But I don't see you.
That's okay. I am just setting everything up. So that is the reason. So everything is just running a little slow. I said start the video. There we go. Now I'll open up chat. All right. Yeah. And there we go. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of season 2. We are on episode 6, and this time I actually have the right Bible study for this episode. So to begin this episode, let's start with a summary of what happens in the episode. So at the end of the last episode, Mary had disappeared and most likely had gone off into Jericho. And Jesus sends Matthew and Peter and Simon to go and find her. And so they go off and they go and search for her. Mary is at a bar where she is gambling and she is doing a and she's doing very well in her gambling. And I will give everyone the worksheet after the summary, and then I will give it to you. So that way, if anyone does show up again later, they will be able to receive it. Then this is sort of just a delay tactic. So then we met up with Simon and Matthew, who have been in the city for a few days, for a little bit now, and had slept in a stable there, and they are still looking for Mary. Eventually, they are told that she is down at a bar, where that's where she has been for the past amount of time that it's been. So they go down there, and they get there, and just as they're getting there, they find out that she is no longer there, but that she has left, and they're about to split up to go and find her when she notices them, and so they end up taking her back, convincing her to come back with them and to talk with Jesus. And when she finally does get the chance to talk with Jesus, She apologizes, saying that she will leave and never come back. And he said, no, I forgive you. Doesn't matter what you have done or what you do in the past. I have forgiven you and I continue to forgive you. You don't have to do anything to earn my forgiveness. It is yours forever. This is also the time where they get to talk with, I'm trying to remind myself a little bit. So she comes back, and they head off to a small village where they're going to celebrate the Sabbath day. They enter into this village, and as this is going on, Shemuel and another Pharisee are trying to report Jesus and get a report on Jesus by playing the politics of the Sanhedrin and the political religious groups. So they get to the synagogue there, and Jesus immediately walks up to a man who has a withered hand. And in the middle of this service, he heals the man's hand, and that causes a huge uproar in this small synagogue because it's the Sabbath day. You're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath day. And Jesus argues, well, isn't this a good deed and therefore something that we should be doing on the Sabbath day? After all, the priests themselves work on the Sabbath. And then as they're leaving, all the disciples are very hungry because they haven't had much food in the past few days. And Simon grabs some grain and starts to eat it. And when they realize what he has done, he at first apologizes for it, but then Jesus says, no, go ahead and eat. And when confronted about it, he says that the man is not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man, and that the Lord of the Sabbath has power even over the Sabbath. And so, therefore, the Sabbath is no longer, at this point, going to be a big deal for us in the future, because Jesus is the fulfillment of what the Sabbath is. And that causes even more uproar amongst the people, especially considering John the Baptist has just been arrested. And we'll see the repercussions of that in the next episode. But that's a basic summary of what happens in episode 6. So let's begin our lesson. I will now put up the worksheet because it doesn't look like anyone else will be joining us. See if it'll work. There it goes. And there. For those who watch it later on YouTube, I will put the worksheet link underneath the episode or underneath the video in the description. So you'll be able to take that and follow along with this lesson as we are going through it. All right. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is Jesus' statement of the Lord of the Sabbath. And this account takes place from Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 to 14. So I'll read those verses. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on the Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they asked, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. All right, so for this first question, what difference do we see between these verses and the episode for today?
Differences between the passage.
Yeah, between the verses that we see here and what actually happens in the episode. So if you notice, we talk about the grain fields and the disciples eating on the Sabbath, and we also talk about the withered hand and being healed in the synagogue, and the talk about whether it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. But what do we notice about these verses versus what happens in the episode?
Is it in a different location?
That's close. It's in a different order. So it starts out with, in the episode, it starts out with Jesus healing the withered hand in their synagogue, and then them going out to eating the grain. Whereas here it's in the reverse order. They're going to the synagogue, and the disciples eat the grain, and then Jesus performs the miracle of healing the withered hand. So it's just a reversal of the way this account is told. So now we're going to talk about 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 to 6, because Jesus refers to this in this text when he talks about what David and his companions did when they were hungry. So I'll read that. 1 Samuel 21, 1 to 6 says, David went to Nob to Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered Ahimelech the priest, "The king has sent me on a mission and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find." But the priest answered David, "I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women." David replied, "Indeed, women have been kept from us, as usual, whenever I set out. The men's bodies are holy even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today?" So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. So what does David say to Ahimelech the priest?
He's on a secret mission.
Yep, he is on a secret mission sent out by the king Saul to accomplish that mission. Now I'm going to read, I didn't put it in there, but I'm going to read from 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 1. And you can always look it up later to see what it says. So this happens directly before David says those words. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan was very fond of David. So that's what's happened right before then. What does this say about David's response to Ahimelech?
Well, he was lying, but it kind of seems like he was trying to save Saul's dignity also.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he didn't want to make it publicly known that Saul was currently hunting him down, which would have been a really weird thing because David was the hero of the Israelites at this time, and to have your king want to kill the hero, well, that's not a great thing. But what is Jesus' point in referencing this account? What's his point in referencing the time that David ate the bread that was set aside specifically for the priests?
Is it an example of something done on the Sabbath that people originally didn't think should?
Kind of. The bread was meant only for the priests. David was not a priest, and yet he ate it, and the Pharisees and all the people of Israel still hold David to high esteem. So if David can do something like that, well, anyone can really do stuff like that, to eat on the Sabbath days or pick grain on the Sabbath day. That's what his point was that David can do it, anyone can do it. Jesus says, understand what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. What does that mean?
Is he asking the people specifically to be merciful? Or is he talking about himself more?
Well, he's talking about the people. He's saying to show, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He's talking about the way that they were doing worship. They were just going through the motions of sacrificing, but their hearts weren't in it. So God was saying, I desire that you guys are merciful to people more than I want you to be sacrificing to me. Right. And finally, what else does Jesus do on the Sabbath? Right there at the end of these verses.
Was this the verse that you read that wasn't on the sheet?
No, I'm talking about at the end of Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 to 14. So we just talked about the eating of the grain. What's the second thing that he does?
He healed the man.
Yep, he heals a man whose hand was withered. They shriveled hands. Yeah, those are the two things Jesus did on this particular Sabbath. And the other thing in the episode, we see that the teachers of the law really got upset over Jesus using a specific phrase, the Son of Man. So we're going to read from Daniel chapter 7, which is the section which includes the use of the word, the Son of Man. And we're going to talk about what it means that Jesus was saying he was the Son of Man. All right, so from Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was laying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the four winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Four great beasts, each different from the other, came out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being. And the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was the second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, get up and eat your fill of flesh. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings, like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was sealed, and the books were opened. When I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking, I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. He told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth, but the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that was crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horns that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High. And the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times and a half time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. All right, so how do these verses connect to our episode today?
A lot of verses.
Yeah. Yep, but there was one verse in particular that connects us to our verse today. It's sort of the title of this section that we are going through.
Where it talks about the Son of Man.
Yeah, it talks about this Son of Man. So let's walk again through the description of those 4 creatures. It's not super important, but we're going to look at them all the more. The first was like a lion. It had the wings of an eagle, and then they were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. So that was the first beast. The second beast looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." The third beast was that of a leopard, and it had 4 wings that like those of a bird, and it also had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. And then the fourth beast was so terrifying, there isn't really a description of it. It just says that it has iron teeth, it had 10 horns, and it had bronze claws. and that eventually another horn appeared on its head and removed 3 of the horns. And this horn had eyes and a mouth and would speak boastfully. Now, who does Daniel see sitting on the throne? Look at verse 9.
The Ancient of Days, which would be God, right?
Yep, exactly. The Ancient of Days, which was a name for God. He was known as the Ancient of Days. And then we get to verse 13, where we find this mention of the Son of Man. And the Son of Man, it says, he approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So we're actually going to jump to the last question. How does the explanation connect with Jesus being the Messiah? So how does that description of the Son of Man, first off, connect us with Jesus being the Messiah?
Well, it talked about how everybody bowed down to him and worshipped him.
Yeah, exactly. And he was given all authority and power, and all nations were put under him, and he would have an everlasting dominion. Those were things that were referencing the Messiah. And so when Jesus referenced himself as the Son of Man, he was saying, I am the Messiah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the explanation that Daniel received in regards to this vision. So he wanted to first know the meaning of the 4 beasts. And so when he was told about it, he said all 4 of the beasts represent 4 kings that will rise from the earth. He wanted to know more specifically, well, then tell me more about the 4th beast with the 10 horns, and then the 1 horn that came up and removed 3 of them and was speaking boastfully. And then it went and waged war against the holy people of God until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of God's holy people. So the 4th one is that 4th kingdom, okay? And it will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from that kingdom. And after them, another king will arise, different from earlier ones, and he will subdue the 3 kings. And he will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. There isn't much more of an explanation than that. I believe that we do have an actual explanation to some of it, but not all of it. We do see the connections with the Babylonians are one of the beasts. The Greeks were the leopards. The Medes are the bears. And then I believe Rome, and especially the Roman Catholic Church, since it's a different kingdom than the previous ones, we would say that's what the 4th beast represents. I believe that's what we'd say as the representation of that, because that's the horn that speaks is the Antichrist, which is the office of the papacy. Are there any questions in regards to our lesson for today? That is all I have.
So was the point of the episode talking about doing good on the Sabbath, or was it talking about the Son of Man as a whole?
The
So
po-
Jesus was, because in the episode Jesus said that um you can do good on the Sabbath,
yeah,
because he was talking about that. And so was that what the section was about, or was it about something more related to like the Daniel passages?
the whole episode as a whole was focused more on Jesus being the Son of Man, the Lord of the Sabbath. Um, basically saying that as the Messiah, now that he is here, a lot of things are going to change, such as the Sabbath rules. The rule of you must rest on the Sabbath, meaning you do absolutely no work, was going to go away because the true Sabbath rest was now here. Jesus was there. He was about to fulfill everything that he had come here to do, which would mean we no longer have to obey God's laws perfectly in order to enter into eternal life. We just need to trust in Jesus.
Thank you.
Yep. The reason we talked about Daniel was because Jesus referenced it when he calls himself the Son of Man, and that's why people get upset when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right. Well, then that is all I have for this evening. It was a little bit shorter, but that's okay. If you watching on YouTube later have questions or comments or things you wish we would have covered, please put them into the comments below so that way I can address them in a future episode, future video, or perhaps directly on YouTube. Otherwise, have a blessed rest of your week in Christ, and I will see you all on Sunday.
Yep, see you Sunday.